shrunk, but it's actually quite impressive that so many people have stuck it out to the end. Thank you very much. I thought it was going to be just me and 4 PhD students who I know. My masterclass, I don't think I'll ever forgive Marlene for this term, masterclass, is in birth technology competence, which was the subject of my PhD. And as Roz was saying, her theory work has followed her for 31 years, and I hope that this isn't going to be following me. It's been following me for about 5 years now, and I'm hoping that that it's not going to be still lurking around in another 30 years. So theory in midwifery, do we need theory? I hope at the end of these 3 days now that you are convinced that we do need theory. I'm passionate about the place of theory in midwifery, and I know that when I go in to teach students about it, I see their little eyes glaze over a little bit when you mention the word theory. But I do think it has a huge place in our development as a profession. Nursing, of course, developed grand theories and mid-range theories and situation-specific theories. And we seem to have not focused as heavily on the theory. In America, they have whole bodies of university departments which have been built on theory. And we have Marlene and the University of Ulster, where she has really encouraged us to think through our PhD work on theories. And of course, the last midwifery theory text was Roz's book in 1995, and we're looking forward to the new edition next year. So the relationship then between theory and research. Theory really helps us to define the parameters for practice. It helps us to define parameters for research questions. And in exploring important aspects for midwifery, then we advance our professional knowledge. And if we advance our professional knowledge, then we advance the profession itself. The imperative in doing this is that midwifery, the profession is changing, and it feels at the moment that we're on a really rapid trajectory of change. We're seeing role changes, we're seeing shifts in boundaries of practice, and I'm not sure whether we're actually evolving or whether there's some kind of revolution taking place, but we need, more than ever, we need theory to ground us and to shape the direction of travel for us. So in building theory, we need to start with concepts. Concepts have been described as the building blocks for theory. And these are complex mental formulations of experience. And Melles, I think, describes them very well. They evolve out of complex constellation of impressions, perceptions, and experiences. And they could be described as a mental image of reality that's tinted with the theorist's perception, experience, and a philosophical bent. Now, the process of concept development, Patricia this morning described really clearly the process of analysing a concept and then taking it forward through research and developing it. And that really, the way in which she described it really pins down nicely what it is, the process of concept development. You start off with a concept that needs to be identified, a concept of interest within practice. Then you analyse it, and that's through a process of deconstruction and reconstruction. And then the concept development then progresses on through the research to contextualise it in practice. And that is the important aspect of it, is to make sure that it is not just a paper exercise that's carried out in an academic vacuum. So in looking at the way in which concepts contribute to theories. If we take one just random example, which is Orlando's theory of nurse-patient interaction, which was developed in the 80s, there are a range of concepts that are within that. So you have this need for help, helplessness, the nursing process, and the disciplined professional response. Now, everybody has given their take on the first edition of Rawls's book. The thing that grabbed me when I read it, first of all, was the postnatal care work that Jean Ball did. And she attempted to theorise postnatal support. And I think that this is an area that's really ripe for redefinition now. Sue said just now that we're kind of deconstructing postnatal care in this country, and I think that we need some theoretical development to just underpin what it is that we need in postnatal support. And I would suggest there are a range of concepts there to be explored around self-care, around self-awareness, around confidence and competence and decision-making. And all of those are concepts that appear to me that could be developed into a theory of postnatal care. So the concept of birth technology competence, which is my area of interest. In terms of birth technology, there just seems to be this gap between practice, where midwives are using technology on a daily basis, the normal, if you like, for them, and the theory, where the concentration tends to be on the role of the midwife in normal, meaning something entirely different, or low technology birth. So, I'm going backwards. It's not good to be talking about technology competence and not being able to work it, is it? The research questions. I wanted to know what is birth technology competence, and what are the skills used by midwives to enable them to function in that technological role. And we all use the technology to some extent, whether it's just using the computers for the bureaucratic support. All of us are using technology in some form or another. So to do this, I used this hybrid model for concept development, which involved these three phases. The theoretical phase, which was the concept analysis, the process described beautifully by Patricia this morning, so I won't reiterate that again. The fieldwork in my case was ethnographic observation. I went into maternity units, 2 maternity units in England, and observed midwives in their practice. How they used technology, how they communicated with the technology, how they communicated with the women, their colleagues, and how the technologies were used to inform the decisions that they made for their practice. And then the analysis phase, which synthesizes the 2 earlier phases. Now this looks like a fairly linear process, but actually there's quite a lot of overlap and moving backwards and forwards between them in this process. So that you can begin the field work before the theoretical phase actually finishes. But not content with that, I felt I had to modify it some more. So having done all that, those 3 phases, I then went on to develop a conceptual model of competence, of birth technology competence, and then went into what I'd like to call a kind of first phase of testing it, which is the confirmatory focus group, which I used, and I'll talk more to that shortly. So in the theoretical phase, the concept analysis used this broad range of literature and also drew on the experiences of the researcher, that's me, and the supervisors. That was Marlene Sinclair, George Kernahan particularly, and also Sam Porter, who brought this marvellous sociological perspective to everything. That moved on to identifying attributes of the concept, which led to the development of model cases to show what the concept is. And this development of the exemplar cases is the thing that often people find quite difficult to grasp, because you're generating it out of the literature. Some of the early field work is also going into it, some of the early observations, and also it's that experience and that mental formulation that comes with talking with supervisors. So the model cases are constructed based on what appears to be a very unscientific process. And I think for the skeptics about concept development work, that's the thing that they find quite the most difficult to grasp, is how you get to the point of developing the model cases. But I think we have to remember that everything in life is a picture based on someone's perspective. So the attributes that were developed out of the first phase were these three kind of key areas: interpersonal skills, professional knowledge, and clinical proficiency. And the interpersonal skills were, as the name suggests, around aspects of communication. That's communication of midwives with women, with the birthing partners, with the machinery, with the other people who may not have been in the room, doctors and others. The caring attributes and touch, how touch was used, the use of therapeutic touch, the way the midwives touched the machines, the way, and Marlene has described this in her work of that, making the link between the machinery and the women, being a kind of conduit between the two. And to what extent women actually are the centre of the care. And professional knowledge. Of course, there's all of that midwifery subject knowledge that you bring, your knowledge of the physiology of birth, and your professional accountability, which is about the decision making. And clinical proficiency, the skills in using the machines, and the skills in decision making, and also the traditional midwifery skills. And how these three fit together is quite complex, and really was the thing that I found really very interesting towards the end. That was the kind of what focused me, what focused my attention. So the fieldwork phase then was this participant observation and interviews with midwives in clinical settings. So I went in and I observed midwives in labour wards, in antenatal assessment, day assessment units, and to some extent on antenatal and postnatal wards. And the aim of the fieldwork phase was really to identify what attributes that were being used in practice, to corroborate or otherwise the attributes identified through the theoretical phase, and to further refine the concept. So in my interviews with some of the senior midwives on delivery suites in the two hospitals, I heard midwives talk about the change that had taken place in the role of technology during the time that they had been in midwifery. And they talked about the way that machines and tools are being used either appropriately or inappropriately, the increasing dependence of midwives on the technology. And so the appropriate use of technology becomes a key factor. Communication skills with human beings, that was something that I was observing quite closely in the ethnographic observations, just the way in which decisions were made, who was involved in those decisions, where the decisions were made. And it was quite interesting that midwives would go in, they would do all the machine readings, have a brief conversation with the woman, then go out and then make the decision on the woman's behalf in some cases with the doctor, and then having made the decision, persuaded the doctor that this was the decision that needed to be taken, then would go back into the room and persuade the woman that this was what was needed to be done. And that was one aspect of decision making that I observed. The use of the hands, the traditional hands-on midwifery skills, is also something which was interesting, because there was a kind of hierarchy in that midwives did use the traditional skills because those were the skills they'd been taught, so they used them. But their place in the decision making was quite interesting in that for example, one example that I saw in practice, and those of you who've heard this research before, I'm sorry I'm repeating this because it's something that sticks in my brain, is this woman who came in advanced labour, and a midwife admitted her, took her to a room, examined her, came out and spent quite a considerable amount of time looking for a scanner and a doctor to